Okay, well, I believe the sign on the top says this hangout is live. So if it's live, hello to anybody who is watching. This is in Pit Lane, the Victory Lap. Joining us this week until his internet drops out again is Rob. Rob.
Yeah, good evening, Brett. Good evening, Michael. Good evening, Andrew. Oh, I've ruined the guests on the show tonight. Well, it's a hangout.
Now, see, haven't we taught you anything about the 101 in television presenting? Never announce the guest before the host does. You've blown it. I mean, Don Lane would, he's rolling in his grave right now.
Oh, I'm sure he's in the glass coffee table at heaven.
With a glass coffee table. Yes, so welcome Rob Jones from ABC Grandstand's box of neutrals. Also join us before we get into any more libelous talk. Also from ABC Grandstand's box of neutrals is Michael Laminato. Michael, welcome to you.
Well, there's not really any more point me being introduced, is there? There's no point me being here either. I mean, Rob James has got half of it covered.
You've got a devil's fork in your room, Michael. What's going on there? You some sort of terrorist?
I'm really in my room, so I come in here and I'm surprised that there are things in here. There's this bottle of blue liquid. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I should drink it or not. I don't really know.
Is that the stuff that barbers put in combs or something?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, hard to know. I mean, this could be a second hangout after the hangout. Perhaps guess what's in my space. It's
probably going to be a damn sight more popular than this. What is the blue liquid, starring Mike Laminato?
Yeah.
I mean, Channel 10 will get 13 weeks out of that.
Oh, they've already signed me on a 5-year exclusivity contract. This is my last appearance here, so I hope it's a good one.
Okay, also joining us is Andrew Sill. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you for having me back again. I thought, since it's called the Google Hangout and I had nothing else to do, I thought I'd hang out again.
Yeah, that's our deal with this. Well, I suppose we should. I suppose we'll get on with it. Before we, I suppose the first thing to talk about it's been announced today that Caterham has, the car company Caterham has gone into liquidation, but the Formula One team is saying that it's going to have no effect on them, and that's basically because they're broke already. But Rob, what do you know about the situation with Caterham? Are they going to actually be at the next round in America?
I think they will be the next round in America, but it's looking more and more desperate as the days go on. I mean, you're hearing all sorts of horror stories about. Korea Kobayashi seems to bear the brunt of most of the problems surrounding Caterham's fiduciary status. They were allegedly running parts that were well past their use-by dates, making very, very makeshift repairs that you probably see in some sort of some very, very dodgy forms of racing, and this is Formula One we're talking about. It's completely unacceptable. I mean, the last time we saw a team try to sort of who was stuck with the car for about a year or 2 years, or HRT, they're not in Formula One anymore. So it's not looking great for Caterham. It's a sad state of affairs for them because they were really promising. I mean, they had the best resources, the best equipment, the best people as well, and they had the Red Bull racing gearbox and cruise unit at the time, and the Renault engine, and it just didn't work out. We never would have thought Marussia would sort of outlive Caterham at this stage, at least.
Yeah, it's a bit of a worry when you're looking at Marussia and saying, I wish we were as successful as they are. Michael, what's your take on the situation with Caterham?
Yeah, it's a curious one because as we're learning, the Caterham business structure, if you like, is so confusing. There are 3 or 4 businesses involved. Some of them, or all of them rather, are in the same building, but they're not all related. There's Caterham Cars, which build the road cars, which is still owned by Tony Fernandez. The GP2 team, which is called Caterham, is owned by somebody at Status GP, who was a GP3 team, now GP2. And now we've got the Caterham Sports, which has just gone bankrupt. Good. And also Caterham Formula One, which is the subsidiary of one Malaysia racing team, which owns the license. Now, all the people who are employed by Caterham Sport, they've all got question marks over their head now because Caterham Sport doesn't exist anymore. So someone has to figure out whether they're going to be employed, and if they're not, what's going to happen to the Formula One team. And the only thing that's safe, as we heard from Manfredi Rivetto, the team principal in Japan, is the license, because that's held in a completely different country where the bailiffs can't repossess it. So if there's one thing that's going to be certain next year, is there will be a license floating around, just as to who's employed by it, who's going to be racing it. That's the question. It probably won't be Caterham, judging by, well, everything Kamui Kobayashi's been saying and everything else.
I suppose that's the big question is if or when they do fall over. I mean, who does pick up that license to go there? I mean, is Formula One healthy enough at the moment that there's going to be somebody with the resources to get in there? We're already seeing that Haas Formula One are on the way anyway, supposedly, but they won't be here next year. So who picks up? Has there been any talk about anybody else, any teams that might want to come into Formula One, like with realistic chances of actually fielding a competitive team?
It's not healthy enough, I'd say, but it's probably stupid enough to enter more teams that it can't afford to have. There is Haas next year, they've got their own license, but of course Colin Collis, which is the big question mark, he's I don't even know what his role is, it's an advisor, it's somewhere beyond the team between Caterham and the mysterious owners, who no one knows who they are. Even the bailiffs who are repossessing the team don't know who the owners are, so they don't know who to talk to. It sounds like maybe Colin Collis was involved with the Forza Rossa. We do know he actually was involved with the Forza Rossa bid, which was backed by the Romanian government and a dealer of Ferrari in Romania, which all sounds very suspicious. So there's, it's not outside the realms of possibility that when Caterham folds, which sounds very much like it will, the license will quietly shift hands via Colin Collis and make its way to Romania. And whether or not that team actually manifests itself next year, the year after, that's the next question. But it seems like that's where the license is headed.
I suppose the thing is with Caterham, it's a problem for Bernie Ecclestone at the moment because he's running around talking. That's the other thing. He's talking about expanding Formula One even more, and now he's talking about going back to Las Vegas. Which, I mean, the last time they were at Las Vegas was an enormous success. And the problem is nobody in Las Vegas seems to have any idea of this happening. If you look at all their local media, they're saying, well, apparently we're getting something called the Formula One Grand Prix. We know nothing about it. So is this another case of Bernie sort of flying kites again?
It seems like it. Yeah, they don't know what's going on. It seems that a lot of people generally seem to say with Bernie Ecclestone, whatever he says is probably the opposite of what is true. It sounds more than likely a couple of people have floated that he's trying to sign a deal somewhere else, maybe in the US, and using Las Vegas as a kind of threat, if you like. It's the same way that every time Albert Park or any Formula One circuit isn't happy with something Formula One's doing, they're we're going to get IndyCar and we'll show you. No one's ever going to get IndyCar, and Formula One's never going to go to Las Vegas, probably not ever again, because, as you said, such a fantastic success last time. So I don't know that's actually going to happen, and also taking into consideration we're already at next season, the maximum of 20 races. Well, that's the maximum before the teams all have to consent to them, and there are more important places we could be than Las Vegas.
It would be nice to see if we could go back to France at some stage. I think it's funny that you've got the country that had the very first Grand Prix, and the problem is nowadays not only is there no French Grand Prix, pretty much there is zero interest in Formula One in France now. It's just gone out it's pretty much gone out the window because, and I suppose it's why they would be hoping for more French drivers to get involved, because right now if you go to France, there's no interest in Formula One at all. You don't see too much. It's not on free-to-air television. It's never in any of the papers. It's invisible.
Yeah, it's a weird state of affairs, considering it is, the heartland of what motor racing was initially. And they've got circuits there built. One of them's owned by Bernie Ecclestone, or he has an interest in it regardless. And it's a weird state for us not to be there. But they don't really seem to be on the agenda to get one back, and they don't really seem interested in getting it back. Interest is so low that they don't even really care. It's on pay television now. Ratings are very low. Yeah, I mean, it's not. If Las Vegas is on the horizon in France, it's not a great sign, I think.
That's true. We got Frosty the Snowman is watching again. G'day, Frosty. He's put a question up on the YouTube channel saying that Ford are looking at joining Indy cars. He says here, and Cosworth would be on the grid there. Is it possible that we'll hear from Cosworth? Have either of you guys heard anything at all about Cosworth becoming interested again?
Yeah, there's been mutterings of it again for whatever reason. It's kind of like when you watch episodes of Top Gear and they have those wacky challenges. There's always a Volkswagen Beetle lurking in the corner to threaten all the teams. Oh, you're going to get Cosworth if you're not careful. Every so often the business of Cosworth fluctuates. It's a little bit unstable. I have no idea who owns it now. I'm not aware of any sort of major car company link tied up to it. Actually, with the Haas deal, I was actually a bit surprised there wasn't much buzz from either Chevrolet or Ford, or even Dodge for that matter, for a Formula One entry in the not too distant future. I mean, with Ford, at least logically, you would think the whole EcoBoost formula that they're trying to sell with their road cars would now be a perfect time for the one for Ford to return. Then also Chevrolet, they currently have a V6 turbo, albeit under different circumstances in IndyCar. So, yeah, I'm a bit surprised that hasn't worked out. But yeah, I've lost my train of thought now. Move on.
Well, I think the interesting thing is, as Frosty points out, there's still lots of rumours around that they could become involved in the WEC and Le Mans again. There's rumours about them having the GT3 Mustang, and they've sort of denied that on a number of occasions. But it's a car that would fit, right in with that category. And let's face it, GT3 has been an enormous success all around the world. So you would think that they might be interested in taking part in that, but certainly, from what I've heard, the rumours are very strong, particularly out of the US, that Ford will have some involvement in sports car racing sooner rather than later. So that could be interesting, but I really can't see them getting back into Formula One, because for some reason it's just not in Ford's DNA anymore. I mean, it's like we've seen locally with the V8 supercars. The local marketing people here see absolutely zero value in having any involvement with motorsport. And that's been for years. If you talk to them, they'll just say, "Look, we don't know why the hell we're doing anything in these, because we don't sell sports cars. We sell fleet cars and cars for mums to take their kids to school." So they don't see it.
Money behind TV shows such as The Bachelor on Channel 7.
Yeah.
I think this poses a bit of a question for all of us. Really, is are there too many categories around the world, and which is making it difficult for companies to determine which directions they need to go in if they want to support motorsport? Because I think the landscape's definitely changing with businesses and their investment in motorsport. They are questioning the investment and the return on investment. And you take a company like Ford that had been involved in V8 supercars, they had been involved in Formula Ford. Well, now they must have a crop of marketing people now that just can't see any value in it, and so they'll rather go and support The Bachelor because their ad will be showed in front of 400,000 people at a time, rather than turning up the Clipsal and spending a fortune to get no visible return immediately.
Well, I think a lot of manufacturers treat motorsport a bit in vogue. It goes in and out of fashion very quickly. I think one example could be like Toyota, for example. They were very big on the World Rally program, and then they went to sports car racing, Formula One, returned back to sports car racing, and then making some sort of return in rallying. Whether they want to put in another $2 billion to get a whole bunch of second places at Formula One again for Toyota is another question. But even Hyundai, they had a disastrous World Rally campaign. They went away from the series for a very long time, and they came back very resurgent. I think it's just the short attention span of kids straight out of marketing school sort of doesn't help. But in my opinion, I think it's just mostly a fashion thing. It fluctuates up and down like the stock market a little bit.
It's also, I think, with motorsport's position in the world as well at the moment. We've already seen the FAA try to respond in Formula One. WEC's doing a great job of it at the moment, and formulas are slowly moving in that direction, where it has to do with environmental credentials and real world, not so much real world applicability of technology, but just how relevant it is. As you kind of said earlier, fleet buyers are not going to be interested in seeing how fast a Ford can go round a racetrack. It's whether or not I think motorsport's facing almost an existential problem here, as how is it relevant to an emerging audience? And that's been a problem. I mean, the youth audience sector is not engaging with motorsport at the moment because it's not as relevant to them as it was to the same demographic 15 years, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. So that's something it has to face as well. And I think that's going to be an increasing problem as the categories try to get to car manufacturers' marketing budgets.
I think that the other thing too, as I say, with it coming in sort of waves like that, because Toyota was the interesting case in point, because the year before, when we went to the Melbourne Motor Show, it was very much a case of the marketing. The spiel was, we race, you win, and then we went back the following year and it was, we used to race and we're really, really sorry about it. And I think the problem was that they lost the excitement. I think and with Nissan coming back, I think Nissan have sort of dragged a lot of them back as well, because Nissan have suddenly seen, hang on, there's a gap here. There's a whole lot of people who think that cars are really boring, and if we make sort of less boring cars and go racing again, it might just fire everyone up again. And it seems to have worked, because they're going to join Le Mans next year. As you say, there is talk of there is some talk of Ford becoming involved, and there's also rumours about a possible Renault involvement coming up in the WEC as well within the next couple of years, because that's now they've got the engine for it. I mean, they've just got to make a few modifications to that Formula One engine, and they could go WEC racing. But anyway, we'll move away from Formula One at the moment. Andrew, Formula Ford was, as we said on the show tonight, Formula Ford was in action at Wakefield Park on the weekend. Have you got heard any reports about what happened there?
Yeah, I had a chat with some of the guys that were running the show up there for Formula Ford, and they said there was another good round. It was a bit more push and shoving this round, a few more safety car periods, and that led to a few penalties. So one thing the Formula Ford group are trying to do is really crack down on poor performance on track or anything that might be against the rules, and which is good, because after all, we're trying to develop the driver, so we want to get them into some good habits. And so there are a number of pit lane penalties applied, which some people were affected by. I think Jordan Lloyd, who's running, I think, second in the championship, or he's dropped back maybe, but he suffered from a penalty that didn't set him up well for the weekend. And Thomas Randall was a standout. He came out in the first two races. He did really well, but had a problem in the third, which let him down. And it just shows you that third race in these, which is worth, I think, double the points, triple the points, something like that. Triple the points is a really important race to be there at the front to win. But James Golding's really doing a good job this year in staying out in front. He just does it in a sort of quiet manner, and he's looking quite good. But it's going to really come down to the wire. That Island Magic round is going to be one to watch. I think they're equal second place getters in the Duratec class, and we can't forget the Formula Ford 1600, the old Kent engine cars that are still running around as well, and that's pretty close at the top as well. Cameron Walters has had a few good rounds and shown that he's on pace this year. So yeah, all in all, it wasn't too bad. Quick turnaround, only a couple of weeks till the next round too. So busy time for a lot of the teams.
That, as you say, the last race does have that sort of the triple points and all the rest. It was the same with the Victorian State Series. Do you think that's still a good idea, or is that sort of a more or less a carryover of the old days where you had the feature race? I mean, for us it was really good. One of the problems, you mentioned too many categories before. Right now there's too many races. I mean, like, when you go into sort of mainstream media, and Robin and Michael might have had this as well, dealing with people in at ABC Grandstand, you'd go in and the sports editor would say, who won the big race? And now you say, well, what big race? There were 3 of them, or there were 4 of them, or there were 5 of them, or there were 4 repecharge and a reverse grid on the first 10, and it's all very confusing. I like the way the DTM they're still doing it the old-fashioned way. They have one race, that's it, and that's all. All the marbles are in the basket there, and you can say, okay, this is the person who won that race. It's not like so-and-so won race 1, so-and-so won race 2, so-and-so won race 3, there was a repechard and all the rest of it, because you don't have time. I mean, like, we're writing for Auto Action, we've got about 200 to 250 words for a whole damn meeting, and you use them up pretty much on one category, because you've got to report on 3 races rather than reporting on 2 or 1.
Yeah, I suppose the challenge is when we look at the Australian landscape, and we're only a small motorsport country really with a small population, is that the competitors want value for money. That if you said to the competitors, look, we're going to give you 1 race and you're going to do 20 laps, they'll sit there and say, hey, look, I paid $1,000 entry fee to only do 20 laps. It's crazy. So having those, and you know, with something like Formula Ford, you can't go and have pit stops. You know, it was, besides blowing out costs, it's so hard to fill the car up with petrol. You have to redesign it to get to the petrol cap and all this kind of stuff that you couldn't really do it. So I think, you know, these short sprint races allow the organisers to give some value back to the competitors, and also allow to have, you know, a constant changing on-track action. It's actually interesting. Some of the officials once told me that they'd rather be an official at like a state race meeting than a V8 supercar event, because for them things are constantly changing on track. You get to see different cars, different speeds, and so on, and they like that variety. Whereas V8 supercars can get a bit boring. I actually once did my flag marshalling stint on one of the production car races at Sandown. It was like a 2-hour or 3-hour race or something. Tell you what, after about 20 minutes of them going around, you didn't know who was in the lead and what was going on, and you're waving blue flags or whatever, that you were just hoping they'd finish and sports sedans would come on or something. So.
You've got to be very careful. The production car people, the production car mafia are very vocal. Every time I've criticised one of these, 2 and 4 hour races where there's 14 cars running around, and you got one sort of Evo 10 out in front by half a lap or something, and you talk about how sort of dreary it all is. They get very, very upset and about it, and you get lots and lots of hate mail, and we are the most popular category, and we are part of the glorious tradition that forged the legend of Bathurst. And
well, that's right. Yeah. We're all living in the past. But no, look, for the competitors would be great. It'd be great fun to go out there and drive for 2 hours and just keep on lapping. But I think that nowadays society's got a short attention span, and they want to see something and move on to the next thing. So I don't know, maybe the times are changing at the moment. Maybe Formula 4 will sort everything out.
Well, speaking of the times changing, we watched over on the In Pit Lane website over the weekend. We carried the live stream from the World Time Attack up at Eastern Creek, and those cars are absolutely incredible. I mean, they're lapping faster than GT3 cars. They're lapping much faster than the V8s. They're lapping at a ridiculous, and they're doing it on treaded tyres. Bizarre-looking things with all sorts of incredible aerodynamics and cars from all around the world. And once again, they had a really big crowd there and a very young crowd. I mean, so what is it that they're doing that traditional motorsport isn't? I mean, why are people so gung-ho about World Time Attack cars, and they're not so gung-ho about, say, sports sedans, which are basically a similar thing?
Well, I think it comes back to society again. If you think about it, why would the young kids like a time attack car? Well, it's unruly. There's no rules, a bit like cage fighting, But it's a bit unruly that you can do whatever you like, kind of thing. Just make the thing go fast and go out there and do one lap and see how fast you can go. Whereas the sports sedans, they're great to watch, and I love seeing the sports sedans go around, but they can't relate to them, or I don't know, maybe there's too much structure in that kind of racing, and they want to see, cars with oversized wings that look mean, and that kind of thing that they might relate to. But I don't know. It's a tricky one really, because they can get a good crowd, but a lot of you go to the Shannon's events and there's hardly anybody turning up to watch them, and maybe it's just that short, sharp attention span thing again. I can watch someone do 3 laps, but and see how fast they can go, but to sit and watch the sports sedans go around for 20 laps, I might start to nod off.
Yeah, I think the other thing that the Time Attack do, and we were talking like earlier in the night on the show on In Pit Lane with Paul Mathis from Motor Classica, as to why that's been so successful, and the things that World Time Attack does so well, and the thing that Motor Classica does, and the thing that V8 supercars do, that the Shannon's Nationals doesn't do, and that the state rounds don't do, is that they just don't publicise. There is, like the last Shannon's round, people in the pub I went past the pub. I've driven. I wanted to go in and have a look at what one was like, and see the sort of people who go in there. And there's terrible sorts of people who hang around in hotels. But as soon as I walked into the place, people came up and said, "Oh, what are you doing? Is there something on this week?" And they're the locals. They're obviously keen enough that they're viewers of the show, and yet they had no idea what was happening on. They go, yeah, what's happening at the track? We heard cars today. There's no posters in the main street. There's no television advertising. There's no radio advertising. It's absolutely zilch.
Well, I think it comes down to who's going to pay for it, though. Is one of the problems is that everything costs, and from my experience dealing with Formula Ford, it's really tricky. There aren't that many avenues you have to sort of spruik your message, and like you were saying earlier, that you've got 250 words to write for auto action. You've got to pick what you're going to write about, and we've lost motorsport news from the landscape, so there was another outlet that we don't have anymore. We've got Speed Cafe. Speed Cafe will only do sort of the mainstream V8 supercar things. So you're really running out of options unless your V8 supercars have got plenty of cash. So, with Shannon's, this is something we're looking forward. If you want to market more and spend more on promotion, then someone has to pay for it. Often it's the competitor. But when you do that, you reduce your competitor numbers because it just doesn't become viable for them. So there's a catch-22 kind of scenario. And I suppose, these guys need to look at how they can get some more exposure. And I've definitely spoken to the local state organisers about maybe doing some more. But again, they're sort of stuck, we're just trying to stay afloat, let alone trying to get some television advertising. That's why I've always said that, they should all support in Pit Lane, because that's, you've always been very supportive of them. So, I don't know, it's one of those tricky things. That's what brings me back to the question. Have we got too many categories? Are we spreading ourselves too thin? But, I don't know. It'll sort itself out, but... yeah, I'm like you. I'd love to see more people turn up because I think they'd actually enjoy it. It's quite a good spectacle.
What I find most remarkable is that I was in the pub the other day, and Channel 9 was on, and they still persist with going what's now called as the Matador Barbecues Cup. Whoever signed on that contract give money to Cricket Australia for a state cup thing that they host, and the crowd of literally, I think there are more people working at the events than there are even competitors, let alone spectators. And it's televised on mainstream television. If you got a Victorian state round, even around the Shannon's Nationals on live television on some sort of commercial network, you would already have a bigger audience on track. Whether you get a bigger audience on television is another story. But I'm just amazed that something like cricket, which is framed in Australian culture, can't even get a crowd to the state-based sort of championships that they have. And yet we have, the crowds aren't massive at state rounds, but there's still a crowd there. And there's no media interest whatsoever. And I think we've seen events. I think, Brett, we were talking last year about, I think it was the Sandown Historic. It was advertised quite heavily on radio, and it got a massive turnout at that event. It was beyond expectation. It shows that the power of advertising does indeed work, and, you tell people that something's on, invariably they may turn up. As long as it's a product to watch too.
The Historics is a great thing too. That's coming up shortly, and I think people can relate to it. At the moment, you've really got that historic movement is one of the biggest motorsport movements in the country. It's like people going to Motor Classica and stuff like that, see classic cars, and the Historics is the same thing. And even from a Formula 4 perspective, the largest grids that we get nationally are at historic race meetings, and they are having a ball of a time. So yeah, and that's coming up. So no doubt they'll get a good crowd at that event. So.
Motor Classic is a good example as well on that, because it is, as you said in the show only half an hour ago, it's the only motor show the only big motor show that's really survived in the country. And watching Bathurst a couple of weekends ago, and watching television generally, ads appeared in it, and it found the audience it was looking for. It appealed to the right people. And people go to that. It is surprisingly popular, and that's coming from someone who is interested in that anyway. It is surprising how many people do go there because they know it's happening. That's the first component, making sure people are aware, and then you can work on the details. But I think the first steps where people are still stumbling.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I mean, it's the old marketing cliche that you learn in public relations, and 101 is as they say, doing business without advertising is like winking at a girl in the dark. You know what you're doing, but she's got no idea. And if you're going to hold these things in secret, but there are ways that, if you're smart, there are ways that you can actually publicise these things without like a huge amount of money. Just the basic thing like the poster. I mean, I know every time, once a month, that up at the Polish house up at Roval, I know every month that there is a professional wrestling card on, because you cannot move around Dandenong, Hampton Park, Roval, you name, right through Springvale, everywhere. There are just posters everywhere telling you that there's going to be a cage match between Crackerjack and Tricky D next, whatever, and loser leaves town or has their head shaved or whatever the stipulation is. But and then they get people turning up and it obviously works for them, and they don't have huge budgets, but they just they go out and they just print up a whole lot of posters, and they do the hard work. They just go to all of the local shops, all of the local places, like the old days of circus, where you turn up and say, "Will you put this poster in your window? We'll give you half a dozen free tickets for your family and your friends." It's very cheap advertising, but nobody seems to do that in motorsport. It's the same, and also local papers. People really underestimate local papers. I mean, I had a story on the show in a local paper in the Knox News about probably about 5 years ago. It was just a little sort of piece on sort of someone pseudo celebrity living in the area. It's incredible, even to this day, the number of people who come up and say, "I saw your photo in the Knox News. You do some television show, don't you?" I mean, I don't even get the local paper. It's just to me it's junk mail. But a lot of people must read the bloody thing.
I think it's the landscape is changing a bit. But I work in marketing. I've got my own marketing business, and it's a really challenging time at the moment with the economy not booming. A lot of companies have got massive budget cuts, so they don't have the money to spend on advertising, and there's not as much basic money going around. That it flows into motorsport, because I've got customers that actually sponsor V8 supercars, and they're cutting budgets. They can't see the value after years and years and years of supporting it. They're cutting budgets, and I think they also, with the next generation of marketers coming through, they don't actually understand. They're always focused on their on their budget, but they're not actually thinking about how they can maximise their potential, say with motorsport, because there is a great opportunity to get a lot of value on so many different levels for companies in getting involved in motorsport. And it's not just about whacking a sign on the car anymore. It's more than that. And it's just, I don't know, I think that there's still a good value proposition for sponsorship in motorsport, but it's just got to be done the right way. And then if there's that money flowing around amongst the motor racing community, then there's generally more for the event promoters, which allows them to pay for the printing of the posters and do those kind of activities as well. But it's it's still a challenging thing, and it's hard to say what's going to happen. The Shannon's guys are really working on their marketing. They're producing their own little magazine, online magazine. The live streaming thing is an interesting concept, because I was watching the Formula Ford races on the Sunday at Wakefield, and the coverage wasn't that bad at all. They've got to fix their sound up a little bit, but maybe that's another option for even the state series and historic race meetings down here in Victoria, where they pay for live streaming of it, so that at least people can get some visibility of what's going on without being there, and sell some advertising or something to the live stream if you want.
I think that's the problem. I mean, we were looking at doing a live stream of Island Magic, and we're also looking at, and we're fairly well advanced to probably doing a live stream of Formula SAE this year. That's well down the track at the moment. But it as you say, somebody's got to pay for it, and people don't have sort of a realistic idea of how much it costs. So yeah, I mean, like with the Formula SAE thing, we're trying to find ways of cutting corners and making sure that we can actually do it, but it's still going to cost like quite a bit of money, because you've got to have people there all day who know what they're doing. You've got to have redundancy. You can't just have, and that's part of the problem I think with the coverage of the Shannons. When you compare what you see with the Shannons coverage compared with like I was watching the DTM and also the European Le Mans Series on Sunday night. In both cases, I was watching them in 720p. I don't have the quickest internet here, but I didn't have one single dropout. It was just like watching it on, on free-to-air television, except that it was, high def, not standard def. It was a very professional coverage. But in order to get that sort of coverage, you've got to have the right equipment, and then you've got to have backups for that right equipment. And that's the problem at the moment that we're trying to explain to a lot of these people. Is it's not just getting one Teradek bolt to do your streaming. You need a second one so that if the first one fails, the second one is going to take over instantly, because there's nothing worse than tuning in and you get 3 laps in and suddenly the picture freezes and you're waiting there for 5 minutes and watching a spinning wheel go around while you're waiting for the broadcast to come up again. But yeah, the interesting thing is if you have a look at the figures for live streaming, that's the other problem at the moment. I mean, with the European Le Mans Series, I mean that's a pretty decent series, but at any one time, the maximum number of people watching on their stream was about 2,175, I think it reached, in terms of at that time. And if you have a look at some of the figures that I've seen for the Shannons, I mean, like for some of the meetings they're getting 1,700 peak. So yeah, it's at the moment it's still not a huge audience, but it's going to get bigger. It's certainly the future, I think, in terms of but it's going to be a long way away. Rob, you're involved in that sort of thing with cams, with social media and all that. I mean, are they talking about anything in terms of their online policy, in terms of perhaps even assisting state level or smaller motorsport groups to get online?
I wouldn't even know about that. I mean, it is the way of the future. I mean, it's my example before about the cricket. I mean, that's partly to do with Cricket Australia sort of dictating to Cameron saying, hey, if you want the big stuff, you got to give us airtime for the little stuff. And I think that's a great sort of model that they've done. Like, if only everybody sort of chipped in together and went, okay, you get V8 supercars, but you've got to dedicate, an hour to Formula Ford or Australian GT or some stage racing as well. And I think stuff like, the magazine style of shows like your RPMs and Motorsport 360 that's apparently having on Foxtel next year, I think that'll be a good thing. But then again, there's sponsorship, there's money involved, it's all very, very murky. But at least with online streaming, it gives those categories that can't necessarily afford the might of a commercial television contract the chance to really get that product out there. I mean, it's not the sole thing they can do. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with, on-track activation. So, with your sponsors at the actual racetrack, they're the people wandering around actually. If you can make a point of difference with your team, make a point of difference in promoting your product, then it makes your investment all the worthwhile. I mean, it's very easy for a team to just get some stickers on their car, get some local plumbers or construction workers or the guys who have the money behind them to do it. But if you're not making it interesting, if you're not making it stand out, then it's no surprise that we're seeing a lot of sponsors walk away from the sport, because some of them aren't taking that extra step in terms of that activation of sponsors.
I tell you, the best people that I've ever seen do that, and that was the jet boat guys. We covered a few jet boat races years and years ago out at Caribbean Gardens and out at Melton, and they were fantastic at getting small amounts of sponsorship from local businesses. I mean, just naming, Harry's Butchers. Well, I mean, I suppose to an extent Island Magic do as well. I mean, they've got lots of the local. I mean, like the Ramada, for instance. So they get sponsorship, and it doesn't have to be sort of huge amounts of money. It can be something as simple as free meals and free accommodation or that sort of thing, just to something that's not going to break their bank, but also give them some sort of profile, and give a little bit extra back to the competitors as well. Because I know from some of the sports sedan guys that some of them are really grateful at that accommodation they've won through, you know, the 50k plate with Ramada, because they say, hey, that's fantastic, because first round of the State Series next year, that's where we'll spend that. That saves us $500 off the top before we even start. So it doesn't have to be cash. I mean, it could be a whole bunch of other things. But what they were really good at doing is anybody who sponsored, they would bring them in. They had a marquee set up. They had a, you know, beef on a spit. They had a bar there. They said, if you sponsor us for $500 or something, you come along and you get sort of, you know, entertainment there. And they had a huge amount of support with something like that. And the State Series just doesn't seem to be interested, at least not in Victoria.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, despite your various beef spread with the great Tony Cochran in V8 Supercar Land, the one thing he got right was understanding, you know, the show business aspect of the sport. Yes, it's a sport. Yes, it's, you know, got all sorts of history and all sorts of prestige in a motor racing sense, but you know, it's got to be sexy for television. It's got to be sexy for the people out on track and those casual viewers who aren't necessarily obsessed with the historical facts and figures and the minute sport like we do necessarily. So it is very difficult trying to get a balance of, you know, respecting the hardcore audience and your followers, not to patronise them, but at the same time you've got to get you know, the casual observer watching your thing. So I think it's a great example of something that's not massive, but it executes everything really well. The Bathurst 12 Hour was another one where a little thing just grew massively just by word of mouth, and it was well promoted, well done, and it's really reaping the rewards of it. I think, I don't know, it's going to take some people with a lot of vision and a lot of patience to really, you know, improve the profile of a lot of motorsport, because, you know, you've got to you know, have a lot of that exposure up the top, but at the same time, from a grassroots level, there's got to be a lot more better support with regards to the promotion and indeed the sort of carnival atmosphere that you're trying to build at these things.
I think that's
monster trucks.
In terms of the smaller categories. I mean, surely in a country with as poor an internet connection generally as Australia, and with such little penetration of internet television compared to other developed countries, that even the smaller motorsport categories, not talking the smallest, but anything below the V8s pretty much, will be ripe for the picking for a telecommunications company to come in and say, hey, look what we can do. You see, if all you have to do is log onto this website, you can see the whole weekend streamed, because we're really good at this kind of thing. I mean, a number of sports that are doing it already with so much ease. All you need is one company to come in and go, hey, we're going to chuck a little bit of money behind this. You've got a little bit of sponsorship for the sport. You've got a whole lot of more reach in terms of marketing just by streaming online. And that's, of course, where people are sharing all the stuff. You're appealing to the younger audience. I'd have thought that would have been a really straightforward thing. If someone would just appeal to some kind of telecommunications company, you'd be happy to do it.
Well, it was funny because you had, unfortunately, they sold out to IINet, but you had Internode, and the guy behind Internode is was a huge petrol head. He brought the first Tesla into Australia, and also he used to race supercars as well. So he would have been the ideal sort of person to talk to about that, and I don't know whether anybody did, but I mean, we're certainly talking with the Formula SAE thing. We're certainly talking with, well, at least one sort of unofficially with one telecommunications company, and seeing if we can get them on board, simply because of the fact that there's that student connection. So that we can get Formula SAE televised live, because the thing is, of all the Formula student, Formula SAE competitions around the world, at the moment the Australasian one is, I think, the only one that isn't really being televised anywhere. So they're very keen to make it happen, because you've got international teams. I think we've got about 30 teams entered for this year, and I think there's about 7 or 8 international teams, a couple from India, one from America, a couple from England. So there's a few teams coming out again. And they're all keen to sort of, you know, and they come out and say, hey, why can't we get this? You know, we go to Germany and it's showing live. We go to England, it's showing live. Why can't this be live? So hopefully we can pull it off. But as I said, it's not as easy. It's not quite as easy as people think. And we're trying to do it sort of, you know, really, really on the cheap. And as I was saying to Michael before we started, you know, I'm even sort of flagging the idea of possibly, you know, if you know, to do it really cheap, is doing it as a Google Hangout. And because I can't see any reason why you couldn't have each camera connected to a separate computer and a modem, and we just switch it like we do here. It's not ideal quality, but it's certainly better than nothing. But it would be lovely to be able to do this properly in terms of of doing that live streaming. Our other problem is, of course, the time zone thing. I mean, that's been a problem with the Bathurst 12-hour, is that it just doesn't fit into a convenient time zone for the rest of the world. So I think that's a problem too, as we've seen with the Grand Prix. Anyway, guys, I think we better sort of wind this up now. We're getting on to sort of 11:17, and I haven't slept since. I've slept about 4 hours in the last 48, so I think I'm going to go and die now. So if you don't see me on In Pit Lane next week, it's because I've passed away, and think well of me. And
you got to wipe EVS before that happens, Brett. You know that. You got to wipe EVS before that happens.
Oh, you tell me about it. Yes, the dreaded EVS. I mean, last night's program, for anybody, I think it looked okay on the television screens, but that's the miracle of television. I mean, if you'd have seen what happened behind the scenes, as Michael and Rob know, it was one of our worst nights ever in terms of things going wrong. I mean, I so miss the days of going live. It was just so much easier to sort of get to 10 o'clock and say, that's it, we wash our hands of it, and I'll see you next week, guys. As it was, I was home sort of madly editing until 2:30 in the morning. So anyway, so next week on the show, incidentally, on In Pit Lane, hoping to, Andrew mentioned the Sandown Historics before, trying to get somebody from Sandown Historics. That's always an interesting exercise. Let's see how we manage to go with that, because that's going to be a huge meeting with the Formula 5000s from New Zealand coming back. Last time I heard we could have as many as about 25 to 27 5000s, which would be unbelievable. I mean, that would be just something else again. So that would be terrific. Also, they're going to use the meeting to honour Sir Jack Brabham, and there's quite a few rare Brabhams and Brabham-related cars sort of coming out of the woodwork, either to do laps or just be on display there. So that's going to be a really, really good. I think that's the 7th to the 9th of November. So hopefully we'll have that on the program next week. But now, Rob, before we go, the customary plug this week on Box of Neutrals. What's happening and when?
I have no idea. It's no Formula 1. What's on the show, Michael? Help me!
Look,
the Peter McGinley Variety Hour.
We just had something called the Peter McGinley Variety Hour. So I think the question is, will that happen this week? That's reason enough to tune in. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, I think that sounds like sizzle to me. That's for sure.
I've got a great idea. I've been saying this for years, Michael. We need to do an episode. This is the time. The time is 9, Michael. It's finally going to happen. We've been saying for years. If 1 week there is literally nothing going on in Formula 1, there's no race, there's no preview, there's no review, we go back in the DeLorean in the time machine. We go back to 1995, and we pretend we're in 1995 and we do a race preview for, the Argentinian Grand Prix or something like that. How's that sound?
Like a reading of Peter Windsor's website, I think, at that rate. But I've always wanted to try and dig up the Triple M call of the Grand Prix they did one year, if I'm allowed to say that. I've already said it. And just play that. Just for
find it. Anybody, please, if anybody has Triple M's coverage of 2008 Australian Grand Prix, Brian Taylor, Sebastian Bourdais, getting everything wrong about Formula 1. It was legendary, and I have not been able to find it.
Yeah. If anyone has it, please, I please you, rail at Box of Neutrals. This journey into the Box of Neutrals wrap-up, but that we want it so desperately. Please help us.
Well, yeah, I would listen to that, because I think I heard a bit of it age ago. There was also 3AW's done a few pretty good ones as well. I mean, the first few years.
Don't worry, we've got theirs.
Oh, you've got theirs.
Yeah, 2012 when Mark Webber started on the front row and then had one of his usual starts. Listening to Football Today or whatever their show is trying to wrap up that race was something special. We do have that one.
Yes, well, Brian Taylor. I mean, he was classic because he became the instant Formula One expert on Sports Today, and for some reason he had a real set against Mark Webber. I mean, just every week it would be like, Mark Webber's useless, Mark Webber's this, Mark Webber's that, and it was just an anti-Mark Webber show. It was unbelievable.
I remember you were telling me, Brett, there was one time where it was actually last year when Mark Webber had his stuff up on the front row of the grid, and basically Brian Taylor just went on this diatribe, this address to the nation. Mark Webber's un-Australian and this and that. Probably accused him of being homosexual, as is Brian Taylor's way, allegedly. And then they were basically like, Jim's called up. Hello, Jim. And then basically.
Oh yes.
Richards.
Yes, I remember that. He's sitting there and he's saying, Jim, you seem to have a very strong opinion and seem to know. And then somebody's we've just been, our producers just told us, is this Jim Richards racing driver? Yes, it is.
I have that recording.
You have it?
I've got it.
Well, you've got it. Yeah, you've got to put that on again. You've got to stick that up somewhere on the podcast or on the website or something. And if you don't, we will. Okay.
We're going to replay Brian Taylor's rant against Mark Webber, Jim Richards on 3AW in 2013. This week on ABC Grandstand Digital. I think our bosses will love that.
Yes. I think 3AW will love it too. I'm sure. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, for the purposes of review and parody, I mean, it does come to fair dealing. So I think you're halfway. I think you're halfway there. But I talked to the lawyers first, before. Let's face it. I mean, if 3AW decide to sue the ABC, I mean, all they're going to get is the costumes for bananas in pajamas and not much else.
The set from Mother and Son, I think, is pretty valuable, but
Yeah, well, I think the set from Mother and Son is actually Mark Scott's kitchen at the moment. So, okay, guys, we will hopefully see you again next week. I've got yes, Frosty the Snowman is saying very much put it up. So yes, I think it would be very good to have listen. So what time is Box of Neutrals on Friday afternoon? Do we know? It's 3 o'clock still.
I think this week it's definitely 3:30, 3:30 on a Friday. That's Eastern time.
There's 3 times that you can hear it. It actually starts at 12:30 on Friday, but our bosses don't want us to promote that. 3:30 for the Hollywood time slot. So if you accidentally stumble across that grandstand at 12:30, you'll get a sneak peek edition of the episode. Then 3:30, then 6:30, and then the sexy new time of 6:30 a.m. on Saturday morning before Francis Leach's show on breakfast. It gets another run.
And then I think we'll be launching Box of Neutrals Digital, the radio station.
Yes, do we know how many people actually have digital radios in Australia at the moment?
I do. So I don't know. Other than that, one so far and counting.
Well, yeah, that's it. But you can hear it online. I mean, anybody out there, if you're listening to or watching us now, you can probably anywhere in the world, I imagine, go to abc.net.au. Is abc.net.au?
Yes.
/grandstand, and you should be able to track it down somewhere. And you do put it up as a podcast as well on iTunes. So that's probably the easiest way. Just subscribe to it on iTunes, and that way delivered to your iTunes mailbox regularly, as long as iTunes doesn't crash, which it does regularly. I mean, we now have iTunes 12, which is gives a whole new raft of things to go wrong. So I haven't actually installed it yet, but I shut it because it used to be quite a usable and quite a good program, and then each new version that they release, they just add more and more features that make it less and less stable and less user friendly, to the point where it's I think their ultimate plan is that it just won't do anything at all apart from freeze your computer. But
They've got a new logo. It's actually red now. That's a massive surprise.
Oh, okay. So you've is that on the have you upgraded yet? You upgraded to Yosemite?
Yeah, I got Yosemite. Loving it. It's actually really good. I like it.
We're mutating into Mac Break Weekly right now. Hello, I'm Leo Laporte. Anyway, so before we get onto Tech Talk, which is our upcoming Google Hangout, Tech Talk with the gang from Pit Lane. Right now, Rob James, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks, guys.
Michael, we'll catch you. Hopefully next week or hopefully soon.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for having me again.
No worries. And Andrew, thanks for joining us once again, and say hello to the dog for us.
Oh, Lulu's sleeping.
Lulu's sleeping. I think Lulu's very lucky. I'm feeling very jealous of Lulu at the moment because that's what I'm about to do. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for. Thank you for you at home for joining us. Thanks to our sponsors, Dyno Dynamics, they support in Pit Lane, and thanks to well, I'd like to have what we really need to do this program. The Google Hangout really needs to be sponsored by some sort of brewery or alcohol company because that would make the show far more entertaining for one of us. Because let's face it, the drunker you get, the funnier it is, whether at your end or ours. It doesn't really matter. Okay, we'll see you next week on the Google Hangout. Until then, from all of us on the Victory Lap, bye for now.